Hi, my name is Leonard Facchinetti and let's write some code together, shall we? What I have on the menu today for you is to continue working on Notestrator, this app that allows you to draw with a tablet, just like this, on top of your computer screen. So if you are doing a stream or if you are doing a presentation or a call, you can draw on top of whatever is on your screen, which is quite useful, I would say. So what we're going to continue doing today is this transformation. So the app is written in JavaScript using Electron. It's a desktop app. And we are in the middle of this refactoring where we are changing the way that we are doing the client side. So I think of an Electron app as a server side, which is the Electron part, and the client side, which is like the HTML, CSS that you use to represent your app. And we were building the client side, so the HTML, in a very strange way using URLs, because Electron does not allow you to pass a string as the HTML that you want to render. So we encoded that as part of a data URI. That's what we did. And that was okay for prototyping, but if we want to distribute this application, then we don't want to distribute all the libraries we needed to build the front end. We are not using the traditional things you would expect to build a front end. Is my gain better now? Can you hear me better now? Okay, so we are not using the traditional things you would expect. We are not using Webpack, for instance, or anything like that, no bundler. But we are using some of my libraries called Liafac CSS and Liafac HTML. We don't want to ship those to every user, and we don't want every time you start the app to have to spin up everything and recreate the HTML from scratch. So, and because the HTML doesn't change, so what we are doing is we are taking out this part of the app that produces the HTML and CSS, and we are going to cache essentially these outputs. We are going to cache the HTML and CSS. That's what we are going to do. You can think of this as like a static website generator of sorts, but a very small one and only running in development, I suppose. And we are going to ship the static website as part of the Electron app. So that's the story we are telling here. And last time, which was last Monday, we worked on part of this. So we have this menu, and the menu has, well, actually it's not only the menu. If I remember correctly, even the drawing window had a bunch of special events that what it was sending to the main process. So there are these three processes. The drawing, I guess I should show this. So this is the app. There is this menu window. Never mind this part, it's broken. And then there is the drawing window. That's when you actually put the pen on the tablet and you draw. And it's a browser window that is transparent and occupies the whole screen. So that's how this works. And sometimes we need to do something on the drawing window that affects the menu, and vice versa. Sometimes you do something on the menu, like you change colors, and that needs to affect the drawing window. And in some cases, the menu needs to affect the main process, the Electron process, to do things like hide, for instance. So we need to send these events from the renderer processes to the main process and vice versa. And we consolidated all these events in a single event, which is kind of a huge hack. It works around the way that the separation of processes is supposed to work in Electron. It's based on this thing. It is a single kind of event called the eval that receives some JavaScript to run in a target. The target being, do you want to run this on the main window? In which case I just eval the JavaScript. So I'm treating JavaScript as a string here, which is like terrible practice, but I think it's the most expressive. So I'm leveraging the power of JavaScript to do what I want. And then there is a way for it to run JavaScript on the drawing or on the menu windows. And the way it does that is just by going into the corresponding window and then calling this execute JavaScript method that is pretty much like eval, but in the context of one of these browser windows. All right, so that is the story that we started last week, but we have not finished this. As you can see, we are still generating the HTML right in the middle of the Electron app. That's not what we want. So we are in the process of breaking this apart so that we are able to cache this HTML and only produce it in development. And I don't fully remember where we stopped. So let's go over the whole code and we'll see what else we still need to do the extraction. So everything here makes sense. Even this part, which is like a script, but we want to run this script when you run the app. So that much stays there. It's only when we escape back to Electron land. So this is a tagged template literal in Electron land. So when we do this, we escape back to Electron. It's only in these situations that we need to double check what we are doing. If we are just producing CSS and JavaScript, we are good. But if we are doing something else, we are not good. I already know that we are going to do something else real quick, which is to set keyboard shortcuts. But let's see. Yeah, so this is a case. So in this case, I think that what I want to do actually is to set the keyboard shortcut, but I need to actually bind to the keyboard shortcuts in a different way. In fact, this keyboard shortcut situation is not doing anything with Electron exactly. What it's doing is there is this shortcuts variable way up here, and it's a map. So this shortcuts variable is just a map, a plain JavaScript map, that we accumulate our keyboard shortcuts in there. While we are doing the HTML and CSS, we just accumulate that information there. And then when we are done, then we yes, there. Then when we are done with all the HTML and CSS way below in the code, almost one of the last things we do is to actually bind the keyboard shortcuts. So the way I'm thinking about this is we are not going to change this code. In fact, I think that this code is perfect because the location where you bind the keyboard shortcuts and the location where you act on the keyboard shortcuts are very near, and I like that these locations are near. In this case, for instance, I have a keyboard shortcut to change the color. I can show you the exact one. So these color changes, they can be triggered by the keyboard. I am typing different letters on my keyboard or different numbers on my keyboard. It's changing the color, and the way that these keyboard shortcuts work, well, they are bound right here. Well, they're not bound, they're accumulated on the shortcuts map. The accelerator is just a variable that I have defined here, so it's just one of the numbers. And then this is what we want to run when, so that's not as simple as I was anticipating. I was thinking that we could just take this keyboard shortcut situation, save it to JSON in development when we are doing the HTML. And then when we are actually running the app, when we are going to use the shortcuts variable, so yeah, in this situation, then maybe we could maybe just load the JSON, but it's not that simple because we need a function as an argument in this case. That can be annoying. Let's start taking notes of the things we know we need to do. So shortcuts with anonymous functions. We need to think about how we are going to handle that. I have an idea, but we'll see. So that's on line on this line. And of course, there will be other places. Yeah, let's continue and find all the places where we need to do some work still. But I have an idea of how to fix this case. I think that most of them are going to be execute JavaScript somewhere anyway. So we could just have a more sophisticated data structure for the shortcuts that give you essentially a target and some JavaScript to execute, essentially the thing that you would pass to the eval event. So all the keyboard shortcuts would trigger a eval event with the right parameters, but that's a refactoring that we need to do. So we are going to look at the other places where we may need to change stuff, and then we'll see which change makes sense doing first. So here we have a similar situation. The shortcuts is anonymous function that executes some JavaScript. Yeah, I'm starting to see a pattern. All right. And in this case, we kind of already have one of these instances where you are doing an eval with a particular target and JavaScript. It's just that it's on change, so it's not when you're, it's a different level. It's not when we are building the HTML, it is when you are hitting a button on the menu. So this is running at the level of my menu, not at the level of my HTML construction on the context of Electron. So it can be kind of difficult to keep your head around, to wrap your head around all these different contexts in which things are happening, but it is what it is. So in this one, it's not quite the same, because this one needs to run not one, but two of these execute JavaScripts, but that's fine, because all we would have to do is to extend this idea that I have for shortcuts to have an arbitrary number of targets and JavaScripts to run. That's completely manageable. And then over here we have another one of those, but everything else seems reasonable. I don't think that we are gonna have problems. Okay, another instance of execute JavaScript, and I think we are about to finish this. Yeah, all right. So nothing too fancy in there. And I fixed an indentation. You don't even see white space differences over here, but I fixed the indentation of something. So I'm going to create a commit for this. And just to make sure, I don't think that it's the case here, because we don't really have keyboard shortcuts over here, do we? We can check this real quick just by searching the variable shortcuts. The first one is over here with the color situation. So we don't have any keyboard shortcuts for the drawing window. But let's see if there's something else here in the drawing window that we need to take note. It seems to be clean. So I guess this is the only place we have to do some changes. So the shortcuts, well, first of all, I want to prove that my drawing window is not using any shortcuts by moving this variable below. It's kind of silly to have to do this, but I just want to make extra sure. But the search that I did just now kind of proved that we are not using the shortcuts. We don't see anything blowing up here, so the Electron process is happy, which means that this is okay. So how about we move it back there? And then let's go over all cases where we are assigning a shortcut, and let's change how it works. Let's first think about this data structure. So I'm not exactly using TypeScript, but let's pretend that I am for a moment. So I still want to have a map of the accelerator. If you're not familiar with this term of art, I wasn't. An accelerator is just the key combination, okay? It's just the way Electron calls the key combination that you use to trigger the keyboard shortcut. So the shortcut, the nomenclature we are using in the app is that a shortcut is a key combination mapping to an action to run. So the accelerator is the key combination that you press, and then whatever function that you want to run is the action, and then this whole thing is this mapping is one shortcut, and if you do it again and again, it becomes these shortcuts. So we have an accelerator, but we want to map it to a list of, so we want a list of objects with the same arguments, so target and JavaScript essentially. So I guess that is the type of what we are looking for. And I'm sure there is some JS docs way of writing a type here, and then Visual Studio Code is even going to try to help me with autocomplete or some kinds of linting errors or whatever if I make mistakes. But just by having this in my head, I think it's good enough for now. Maybe in the future we decide that we actually want to use TypeScript, and then I will have to write this type for real. But then I'll probably have a name for this as well, so I think it's worth having this over here. It's just that we now know what we want. So now let's see every place where we are using shortcuts, and we'll have to change it. So instead of being a function that we set to that, we set a list of an object containing a target, which in this case is the menu, and some JavaScript to run, which in this case will be that JavaScript. And this refactoring that I'm doing comes with its own trade-off. Now I'm no longer able to set keyboard shortcuts that do arbitrary things. I'm only able to use keyboard shortcuts that are going to run some code. But if you think about it, my eval thing is capable of running in any context, any browser window or the main process. And I can pass some arbitrary JavaScript to run here. So it's not as bad. In fact, I would say that this is a better abstraction. It is more constrained, but I think it's more correct as well. And now let's keep this up here as a reference, and we'll find every occurrence and just blaze ahead and knock all of these out. So in this case, I'm still running on the menu, and the JavaScript that I want to run is very similar to the other one. And then I just get rid of this function, like so, and fix the indentation. Move on to the next one. We are still running on the menu, so that is all right. We can copy from here. I guess I'll just be quiet while I do the rest of them. This is the not exactly glamorous part of programming, when you have this high-level concept, but then to execute it you have to go 14 times and do some manual work that would be kind of hard to automate. If you were really pressed to automate this, I guess you could, because it is kind of standard what I'm doing. There is a pattern to what I'm doing. But for our case, forcing occurrences I don't think justifies automating this. So you end up in the situation where you have to carry the refactoring out by hand. Happens a lot. It's not terribly annoying, but it's not terribly satisfying either. Most of these I'm running on the menu. And I guess most of them, pretty much all of them, I am selecting something and then clicking on it. So suppose I could be even higher level and just get a hold of this class maybe as a special case. I think that is too much. In fact, we have one instance that doesn't exactly follow this pattern. And these are the kinds of thoughts that go through my head. Can I automate this? No, not worth it. Is this really a good refactoring? I guess it is. Should I listen to some music while I do this? It's kind of mind numb, but you have to pay attention to what you're doing. Yeah, like to fix the indentation here. Yeah, but I sometimes listen to music while I do this. I of course not listen to music on the stream. Don't want to get copyright strikes, but I guess I could listen to my own music. In that case, I wouldn't get a copyright strike from myself. Hey, we're almost there. I really hope this pays off. Really hope I'm not heading in the wrong direction. And there you go. That was the last one. Then we are using the shortcuts here, and we need to change the way that we use the shortcuts. So I'll come back here and yeah, let's see how we are using the shortcuts and change that. So our entries thing is to make sense, and then we have an accelerator, and then here we don't have a click. It's not a function anymore. So we don't have just a function to pass. What we need is to match the target and the JavaScript. So I'll do that. Target. It's gonna be an object. Target and JavaScript. And then over here we have a label. That's all right. The accelerator is still the same, but then the click function needs to be an actual function. And it needs to do what we were doing here. Well, not quite. I guess we'll trigger one of those events. Oh, and this is not a single target in JavaScript. It's a list of. So we need to map over this list. And that's what we need to do here on the click. So we need to give this a different name. I'll call this the evals for now, but it's not really good. It is the arguments for the eval event. So we'll say that for const of that pattern we just cut from above of evals this is not happy. Why is it not happy? I don't think it likes the syntax of this. I don't know. Let's continue, we'll see. So we will just send an event, which will be IPC main, I suppose. Can I send an event right away? I think I can, just by using emit, or maybe invoke. emit. Okay, let's try emit. And I'll emit an eval with the arguments. I don't really need to explode the arguments. I'll just do it like that. And I need to rename this because eval is a special thing in JavaScript. I'll call it eval arguments. And I'll call this evals arguments. I don't like these names because arguments is also a special thing in JavaScript. But it is what it is. Okay, so what we are doing here is we have a list of shortcuts, which is our map. Then for each accelerator and evals arguments, we have a click that goes over the evals arguments and emits the eval with that argument. Maybe eval could receive multiple arguments as well. That could be something. We can think about it. I'll leave a note here and we return to this in a second. So eval event receive multiple arguments, maybe. Meanwhile, while we think about this, let's just see if we did not break anything. So it seems like we broke something because I am typing the keyboard shortcuts and they don't work. Let me quit the app. And let's go through what could be going wrong. So console log of maybe evals arguments. Okay, that seems correct. It seems like we are getting the right evals arguments over here when we trigger the keyboard shortcut. So probably the problem is with IPC main emit. Let's go to the Electron docs. Try our luck. The documentation changed, so I don't know what I'm looking for. Maybe API, IPC main, and then let's see what we have. On, remove, handle. How do I trigger? That is kind of silly because I am sending an event from the main process to the main process. That is kind of silly. I could just extract the handler for the eval event into a function that I call from here instead of emitting that event. That's what I'm going to do. So I'll call this the eval handler. I know, names are just getting worse here, but whatever. Oh, at least I need to spell it right. There you go. Eval handler, and that function doesn't exist. So if I try to run the code now, it's going to explode. So let's go to the handler for the eval event, which is this guy. And let's extract this into a function. So eval handler, it is going to be asynchronous, and it's going to receive this as arguments, and it is going to do that. And then over here, I can just say eval arguments, and I can just return. So I guess I will do this the long way. I could just not make it asynchronous and just call eval handler, but I guess I will do it the long way of saying return await eval handler of eval arguments, like that. Not sure I love this line, but it should work now. Let's see if the keyboard shortcuts are working. And they are. Excellent. All right. Let's see if all the keyboard shortcuts are working, because we did the refactoring that touched everything. So the colors are working, stroke width is working, the tools are working, fade is working, drawing mode is working, and then hide the drawing, hide just the menu, and then erase. That's odd. Oh, I am using the highlighter. That's okay. Now I am back in regular drawing mode. So if I draw a bunch of things, I can undo and redo, and I can erase everything, and I can quit the app. Okay, so all the refactoring was successful. And it doesn't hurt to just give it a quick glimpse. Quickly scanning. Oh yeah, so there was one that was special. Ignore mouse events was special. It sent an event both to the menu as well as to the drawing window. And I'll just believe that this worked. Whatever. I wasn't paying attention fully to all the details. This indentation is wrong. This indentation is wrong. And we are good. All right. So now we can, I suppose, proceed with the refactoring to extract this HTML thing. Now let's consider, do we want eval to receive multiple arguments? I guess now it is the eval handler that could receive a list. Yeah, let's see where else we are sending this eval event to see if it's worth doing this change. So right here, for instance, the way it would look is it would be a list instead. It would look like this. It doesn't change a lot. It is not terrible. And then you could just call eval once and then send all the things you care about. Yeah, I'll bite the bullet. I'll do this one. Okay. Another one of those cases where I have 12. You don't exactly get to see that on the stream. So check it out. 12 instances of this. We are going to go through all of them and make them lists. And this time I should be taking note, but I'm not, of what we are touching here, because we are not touching the keyboard shortcuts anymore. We are touching things like, what are we touching here? Well, when there is some change to the settings on the form, so the menu is a form, the menu that you see with the colors and everything is a form. So anytime we change anything in the form, we send an event to the drawing window so that it will update the custom cursor, for instance, and be prepared to do something different. So if you change the color, it will draw in a different color because of this invocation of eval. Well, so I suppose it will be easy to say if we messed something up in the refactoring, because it is just not going to change colors anymore, for instance. And it will also not the ignore mouse event stuff will not work, so we will not be able to click through our drawing and interact with the window underneath. And this is just the converse. This is if one is disabling, the other is enabling mouse events. Now you may be thinking, could I have a special case? Yes, I could have a special case. Now you may not be thinking this, but I am. So I could have a special case in my handler that checks, is the argument an object? If so, then I would just run that eval arguments. But if it's a list, then I'm going to go through them. And I could have that kind of polymorphic argument, but I tend to not reach for them unless I really have to. And this is a case where I think that having a list actually makes sense. So it's completely fine. Now, if other people were consuming this API, and if this is like a huge hassle for everyone to always have to pass a list, then maybe I could have that special case, that polymorphic case. I'm almost at the end. And I feel like in the last streams, definitely today, I'm not adding things to the app. I'm just changing the way that existing things work. But that's all right. I think that's part of development. It's an important one too. Let's double check that we did not introduce any syntax errors or anything silly like that. A quick scan should reveal anything weird. And if you see something weird, let me know in the chat. Because sometimes I miss these things. Okay, it seems like everything is okay, but I need to change this as well. Because now the eval handler, so let's rethink the naming here. So we have our eval event. Those are the invocations we just changed. And let's just call this, not the eval args, but I don't know what to call these things. But I know what to call this. Instead of calling it eval handler, I'll call this evaluate. Similarly, oh yeah, I guess I'm starting to do a bunch of things, aren't I? Let me commit these simple changes. These are just wrapping lists around the arguments. And then in this commit, the app doesn't really work, but that's all right. Let me undo this commit and fix the commit message. It needs to be a single space. That's my pattern. So let's change a bunch of things. The eval event is not going to be called eval. It is going to be called evaluate. Now just change this globally. Look at the commit log. Look at the diff to see if everything makes sense. Okay, and the app is still not working. I just renamed the event. Now instead of eval handler, I'll call this evaluate. You may be wondering, why am I not doing this with just eval? Why do I call this evaluate? First, because it's more explicit. I like more explicitness, but also because eval is a thing in JavaScript. It's a function that comes with JavaScript. So evaluate is not a function that comes with JavaScript. So there you go, evaluate. And I changed this so that even down here on the loop that we do for the keyboard shortcuts, it's still all right. It's still called evaluate. So there you go. Now let's commit this and move on to the next part, which is these arguments. We need to rename these. These are terrible names. So they're not really the arguments anymore. They are the specification. So they are this object, target and JavaScript. What does this even represent? I don't really know. Evaluate configuration. I'll go with that. Evaluate configurations. So the event is just forwarding. It's blindly forwarding the evaluate configurations down to the evaluate function. And this should be evaluate configurations. And then I need to loop for const blah of evaluate configurations, which is now a list. Then I do this switch case. So a target and some JavaScript to run. And I suppose I don't want to do the explosion here now that I have a proper name for this. I guess I'm going to rename this, or not really rename. I don't think I'm able to do this with renaming. The reason why I don't want to do this explosion is because of the JavaScript name. The problem with this name is that it's actually another instance of something we already have on the app. We have this JavaScript function that allows you to write inline JavaScript like this. So having this as a variable here is overshadowing that, or not overshadowing, it's just shadowing that. I don't know, kind of don't like it. So I'll go with evaluate configuration. So maybe I'll just call this configurations, and I'll call this the configuration. And I'll call this the configurations. All right, so now I need to change some things around. Here as well. Configuration target, configuration JavaScript. There you go. But also we need to change the keyboard shortcuts. Oh, let me see. Yeah, this is returning right away, so the loop is not gonna... Oh my god. This whole thing is not gonna fly, because I have a loop, but then I'm just using return, so I'm only running the first one. And the issue is that I want to be able to get a hold of whatever was returned from this code, and I'm not if the thing is a loop. I don't want evaluate to run multiple configurations. I want it to run a single configuration. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a brief look at this. I'm going to commit what we have, and we are going to revert some history. There are two ways to do this. I can go to the Git graph and look at the latest commits, and maybe I literally revert them if everything in them doesn't make sense, but most often some things make sense, like the renaming of some variables may make sense. Like evaluate, for instance. We changed from eval to evaluate, which I like better anyway, and I want to keep that part. So I don't think that just by looking at the commit log I'm able to do this. Yeah, usually if you are all the things that you did, literally all the things that you did, you'd want to get rid of, you can come here and just revert the commits. But I know that I want to keep some things. I want to keep the name, for instance. Maybe even this name, this concept of a configuration I may want to keep. So here we go again. We will do this change manually. Let's look for evaluate and change this from a list back into an object. Oops, I messed something up. That seems alright. Let's go to the next one again. Now that's better. I really hope that I'm not introducing bugs in this back and forth. It's really easy to miss like a bracket, and then your code is not gonna run. And there will be an error in the console, but the console is hard to see. Not the Electron console, that is easy, it's right down here, but the browser window consoles. We have two browser windows, two consoles, and they are hard to see. You have to change some of the configuration about the windows so that you have enough space to see the DevTools and to see the console and to see the error. I'm almost at the end. There you go. Alrighty, so here I will not receive configurations. I will receive configuration. Well, now that I did this, now that I have a single configuration and I don't have the need to loop around the thing, kind of maybe don't want to use the word configuration here, because if you just look at the evaluate function, you don't know what configuration is supposed to be because we are not using TypeScript. So maybe I'll just use the other way of writing this, which is target and JavaScript, or maybe target and code. I don't know, but that is a big refactoring. I'll do it in a moment. Bo is here. Hey Bo, it is alright. It is alright. I am doing the low-level thing that is interesting to see the process of how other people do it, but I'm not like adding features to the app today. Looking forward to the stream tomorrow over at Aria's channel, when we will be writing like new exciting stuff for Reaper. And I'm not sure that you will be there because you said that you had other things you had to do, but if you can, that would be lovely. It was great to have you on the stream last week. Okay, so now we have the evaluate. It's not configurations, it is configuration. And I kind of like the name here. I don't want to be explicit about the parameters here because it doesn't really document anything. You know that if you are looking at this code, you should refer to the evaluate function, because this event handler is pretty much a way to call evaluate the function. So there is that. So exploding the arguments over here, I don't think it's of any benefit. I will not do it. And then let's continue down here and check this. These eval arguments we are calling configurations, and this one we are calling configuration. So again, I don't think it's worth expanding this. Yeah, all right. I'm available tomorrow so we can code some JS effect stuff. Awesome. And yeah, if you can make it on Wednesday here on this channel, we will be recording some bass. I bought a bass guitar today, in fact. I did not work on my day job. I went out to the store to get a bass guitar. And then I actually played the bass for a little while. I'm not a bass player, but I was doing my homework for Wednesday and I had to come up with a baseline. So that's what I did. And it doesn't sound awesome, but it sounds like a bass guitar. And it will be fun. It will be fun. Now I'm double checking this very carefully because if I introduce a mistake at this point, things will blow up, but in subtle ways, and it will be a nightmare to figure it out. And in case you were wondering, the thing that I'm looking for is like this red is highlighted. I don't mean just this highlighting, it's highlighting the highlighted part of the code. So that's exactly the part that was removed. Everything else changed because the indentation changed and everything. And these two are now in a single line. But if the red highlight looks right to me, then that's exactly what I'm looking for. So you were saying, are you good with Bezier curves in JS effects? I have never used Bezier curves in JS effects. All my graphical user interfaces are just rectangles and a bit of text like labels. But because of Notestrator, this app that we are working on right now, we learned about Bezier curves a whole lot. I have a whole stream in which I explain what Bezier curves are and how they work, and not the traditional explanation. If you go look for, and that's what I did, I looked for Bezier curves on Google and YouTube, you're gonna find like thousands of videos of people explaining the mathematics of how, given the parameters for a Bezier curve, how do you actually draw. But I don't care about that because both in the case of Notestrator, in which we are using SVGs, as well as in JS Effects, I suppose that in JS Effects this is also true. You just have to say the control points. What are the control points? And then the engine is going to draw the thing for you. So the most of explanations are for the thing that is already done by the engines. We don't care about that part. We care about computing where the control points should be to draw a curve that you care about. So that's what we did on the stream. I explained how to come up with the control points, which are the points of where the curve starts and ends, as well as the control points are like the points that determine how curvy the curve will be. So I know a thing or two about Bezier curves and how to come up with smooth Bezier curves. I have never used them in JS Effects. I have never needed them. And I didn't know much about them before Notestrator, so there's that. Okay, let's see what we have. So the keyboard shortcuts should be working, and it seems like they are. But also we did touch some other things. So let's see if the app itself, if the most of the functionality is working. So we are now fading the lines, which is why the lines went away. You see, I draw a line, it goes away, it fades. So let's see if I can interact with the application underneath, and it seems like I can. Can I hide the drawing? Can I hide the menu? Can I undo? Oh, no. Can I draw? Can I undo? Yeah. Can I quit the whole thing? Or can I erase the whole thing? Can I quit the whole thing? Yeah, all right. So that seems good. Okay, it's not for graphics. Okay. But still, Bezier curves. I think that the concept is going to apply. It's not for graphics, but for my silent treatment gate. I know what the control points are supposed to do, but coding that is a different thing. So maybe in your context, you are interested in the thing that everyone talks about on the internet. And I kind of know one thing or two about how to draw a Bezier curve given the control points. But I don't know much about it. I know the algorithm for coming up with the control points off the top of my head. And it could be included in the graphics, but mostly for the soft gating. Oh, okay. So you are doing some soft gating based on the Bezier curve itself. So here is Inkscape, and I can draw some Bezier curves to explain what I mean. So Right now, the Bezier curve is actually a line. It's not curvy. But then when I make it curvy, there are these control points. And what we are interested in Notestrator is you have a bunch of these points, and these are just, you moved the mouse around, and I was collecting your coordinates as you moved the mouse around to draw, but I don't want the drawing to be all squarish. So essentially what I do is something similar to this. I round off the control point, the points in the line. I round them off and I come up with these control points, these little guys. I compute them. That's what we did on the stream. We compute these points based on the curve. So given this series of points, I compute these control points, and then I just pass them as an SVG. I pass that to Electron, and Electron draws that for me. Same with Inkscape. Inkscape draws that. So that's the part that I know. I know this algorithm off the top of my head. It's super simple. How to come up with a bunch of control points, these little guys, given a series of points. But it doesn't seem like that is the thing that you want. It seems like what you want is maybe you already have. Yeah, so you know what the control points are supposed to do. So yeah, that's what they do. If you have them further away from the point on the line becomes, the curve becomes more curvy. So I suppose that in your case, the effect, the way that it works is there will be some curve like this that is the gain on your gauge, and maybe you already know what the control points are. These little friends here, maybe you already know what they are, and you're only interested in computing this curve in the middle, which is what everyone on YouTube is going to explain how to do. Because that is going to be your gain over time. So here you have time on the x-axis and your gain on the y-axis, and that's going to be the gauge opening up. Maybe the gain is going up, so you want to compute the gain at a given point, and for that you are going to do the thing that everyone explains how to do, but I'm not really sure I know how to code off the top of my head. It's going to be 2 points with 1 control point. Okay, that's also something else that exists. So this curve that we have on the screen right now is called a cubic Bezier curve. It has 2 control points. But there is also this other kind of Bezier curve, which is a quadratic Bezier curve in which both control points are the same point, essentially. So that's a quadratic Bezier curve for you right there, instead of a cubic one. And when you change one of the points, both of them go for the right, but it seems like Inkscape is not capable of doing that. But in any case, yeah, it's a different kind of curve, and it's even simpler to compute these points. But if I remember correctly, we tried it for Notestrator and it didn't work for our application, which was to smooth out the curve. It became just all jagged in a crazy way. But as of now, the transfer curve cuts off weirdly. So I'm gonna need a Bezier transfer curve. You may not need that. I mean, if all you want is go from a straight line, so maybe if you have a straight line, it sounds weird or whatever, just want to have something curvy, you don't need to go all the way to a Bezier. You could do some easing function. There are easing functions that are relatively simple to implement. Things like, I think we implemented one of these on the stream before with Aria. The thing was, yeah, I was talking about how to not have clicks in the effect. If you change the cutoff of EQ real quick, you don't want to have a click in that transition, so you have this variable that is like the real slider, the thing that the user is changing, and then you have another variable that is tracking the real slider, but it's always behind. And we talked about how to do that so in a way that it would be smooth. So you don't want the thing to just track right away, and you also don't want it to be linear necessarily. So we talked about this easing function that was ease out, I think. It was an easing function, and it could solve your problem, but I don't know. I have a 1 squared thing going now, but it makes a weird floor. It needs to be raised. Yeah, I don't know exactly. I'm not even sure I understand what you mean by that. But we can talk about it tomorrow, if that's what we are going to talk about tomorrow. I'm not exactly sure I know what is on the agenda for tomorrow, but we can talk about that in more detail, and then I can try to make sense of it. But right now, I think that I did all the refactorings I wanted, so let me go again over all my shortcuts. Yeah, no, we also don't want to jump ahead of ourselves, and we want to leave some fun for tomorrow. Right, so what we have on the shortcut situation is we are still binding to a list. That makes sense because in the shortcut we are not interested in the result of this. We know that we will ignore, so it makes sense to pass a list. So all the shortcut situation is passing a list. That's all right, and in fact in this case we are even using the fact that it's a list. But for evaluate, so if we look for evaluate, then we are passing just a single configuration, which is our target and JavaScript. And I'll just glance at all of them to make sure. All right. And then on evaluate, we receive one of the configurations, and on the handler, we just pass the configuration along. And as well as here on the accelerator, we just take the configuration and we pass it along. And of course, we loop. You're asking me if I have tried to use faceplant. I have not tried to actually use faceplant. I didn't have the time, but also I'm not exactly sure how you were supposed to use faceplant. Do you want to use it like for mixing, or is it something that you use for just listening to anything? If you are on headphones and you want to counteract the harshness of hard pan left, hard pan right, then you use faceplant. I don't know. Did you use faceplant? What did you use it for? I'm interested. Okay. As far as I remember, everything is working, right? And we are ready to do the extraction that I actually wanted to do. And even if I want to do something like interact with the application underneath, I can. That's awesome. Let me quit. Okay. So how about we finally do the extraction? Yeah, let's think about how we are gonna do this. Oh, okay. So it is for mixing. Hopefully Aria will do an extensive tutorial for it. Yeah, I'm interested in seeing that being used in musical ways. I am all into the blips and blops, and I'm like, oh, okay, I understand the principle behind all of this. But then how do I actually use it musically? How do I use it in general? Even if it's something for like mixing a podcast or whatever. Yeah, I never know how to actually use the things. That's why we have the streams on Wednesday, I suppose. I've used it quite a lot. It is great for adjusting the stereo image of the master bus, but great for a stereo vocal bus. Oh, okay. We do have a stereo recording of a guitar, and we have stereo vocals as well. We did not record the vocals in stereo, but I doubled the vocals and I synced them very carefully. So maybe we will use faceplant on the mix for the song that we're recording on Wednesdays. Meanwhile, you can check Dan Warhol's headphones are not stereo. You know what? Here's what I'm gonna do. Dan world, so I don't forget. Headphones are not stereo. Yeah, I really do need to watch this. Saved for later. I want to stop making a fool of myself on the streams. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Well, I need to save a file with the HTML. I need to save a file with the other HTML for the menu, and I need to save a file for the shortcuts. So here's how this is going to work. So before I even get the app ready, okay, I'm going to check if the app is it's packaged. Yeah, try it out tomorrow on Wednesday. Yeah, maybe tomorrow we'll talk about faceplant some more, or maybe we'll talk about it on Wednesday, or maybe we'll just talk about how to get the bass guitar to sound good. And the bass guitar, I think, is essentially mono. I don't think I'm gonna double the bass guitar. Do people double the bass guitars? I don't think they do that. So it is mono essentially, but maybe we'll talk about faceplant for some other reason. Okay. If the app is packaged, then I will not do a bunch of things essentially. If the app is packaged, so this variable, this function, actually, I learned about it. I want to mention this. So there's this package that I found while I was looking for something else or whatever, and I found this package, Electron is dev. What it does is it gives you a variable or a function, I forget, gives you a variable to determine whether you are in development or not in Electron. Okay, but then I found this. What is the difference between this and app is packaged? It seems like app is packaged came later, and then you can also use isDev with an environment variable, but I don't think we are going to use an environment variable to set the environment. And then I looked at the source for this and I was like, okay, this is not too complicated. All this is doing is, if there is an environment variable, then use it, otherwise use is packaged. So I don't think I'm going to use the package. I'm very glad that I found it because I learned about is packaged. I didn't know about this. Very glad I found Electron is dev, the package, to learn about this, but then I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to go with is packaged because I don't need environment variables and I'm using newer versions of Electron, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, so if the app is not packaged, then I'm going to recreate some files. I'm going to use, I guess, and now you may be wondering, why do I do it here instead of doing it there? Well, the reason is, in an Electron app, it doesn't make sense to require everything right away for performance reasons. If you don't want to do something right away, don't require it right away. So Electron you need to require right away, and maybe some other of these as well. But if you don't need to do anything with the file system right away, only require it when you actually need it. This way you make loading the app faster. It's not usually a concern when writing Node.js for the server, because on the server the spin up is not what you care about. The server is going to run for hours, days, months. But on a desktop app, you do care about the startup. We want it to be fast. And I'll not use fs, I will use fs promises. We are in an async context anyway. And I'll just write file of drawing HTML. What is drawing HTML? It is this whole thing. Well, not quite. There is a wrinkle. I'll talk about it in a moment. But let me first copy all of this. And then I will run the app in development. And I expect a file to exist. Well, app is packaged is not a function. It is a boolean directly. You don't call it. All right, so that worked. The app started, and also we have a lovely new file, drawing HTML. Awesome. I still like how we can define the whole app in a single JavaScript file, but now we are caching this HTML. But we're caching the wrong thing. So you see how this drawing thing is not... Let me find an instance of this. I'll look for style. Yeah, it is not using our design system. It is not using... let me collapse this and go to there. Oh no, go to there. So yeah, we are not doing the extract inline style stuff. So that's what we need to do. We need to come here and call extract inline styles with this whole HTML. And now when we save and run the app, it is like a static website generator that runs anytime you start the app in development. Isn't that awesome? Now this is supposed to have our design system in there, and here is our design system and everything. Awesome. All right. So here is our drawing, and let's do the same for our menu HTML. And I guess I will do the same extract inline styles we just did. And then I will bring in the HTML for the menu. You can see that I'm copying. I am not cutting, and essentially I will want to get rid of that code, but I want the app to work more or less as I am doing this thing. I don't want to have to write a lot of code and then at the end see if it worked or not. So I'm trying to keep everything working as I go along. And let me double check that I got the indentation right. Oh no, I got it wrong. It's indented wrong. So I'm going to select this whole block again, indent it inwards once, and then run prettier again to prettify the thing. And now the indentation should be right. See, it's right. There you go. All right, so when I run this, this will not work this time because I am using in the middle the shortcuts stuff, right? So I will need to say const shortcuts map about here, or maybe even here. Doesn't really matter all that much. And the variable now exists, so I guess I would just go ahead and write file of shortcuts JSON with JSON stringify of shortcut. Well, not really. What I want is an object based on shortcuts entries. If you remember, shortcuts is a map. We may need to change that. We may want to change that, but oh no, what I want is not to create an object this way. I want to say object from entries like that, and from entries is going to receive an iterable, and entries is going to produce an iterable iterator. So that is supposed to work. Now when I save and run this, there should be two new files. Menu with our design system and everything, and shortcuts JSON with this weird crazy structure. It is not alright. Oh no, it is alright. It is alright. Yeah, this is a keyboard. I thought that this was like an index or something. No, but this is just the literally the keyboard shortcut. But I don't like the way this reads, so I'm going to rerun this. I'm off to check your Automixer code review video now. All right. You cannot get enough of these coding sessions, right? It's always fun. So yeah, I'll keep it up. So while stringifying the thing, I will pass undefined to, which tells JavaScript to please indent the code this and pretty print it. So now our shortcuts JSON looks like this, which is not a lot better, but it is better. So let's see the changes we made. It's mostly copy and paste, so that's all right. And I'll leave a note here for later. Shortcuts should be an object, not a map. We'll see if we can get to that today. And then what we want is to actually start using this. So when we are doing this load URL, we are instead going to do a load file. And I kind of want to do what they do on the getting started app that we used to get started. Oh, even this part of the website is different. Okay. Prerequisites, quick start. There you go, here it is. I want to do it like they do it. And they call load file of just the file name. That's unfortunate. I thought it was going to do some kind of joining or whatever. But if it works, it works. We'll see. So instead of load URL, we will use load file. And what file do we want to load? We want to load drawing HTML. Now my concern here is when I package this, if this will look for the file in the right place, or if I need to be explicit and do something like path join dir name, whatever. But we'll get to there later. To do, check that this works. This relative path works when the application has been packaged. Similarly, for the menu, I will not load URL, I'll load file. And this file will be menu HTML. Then we can come to here. We have a function that we are no longer using. The function that was doing the hack, the prototyping hack, that was producing a base64 string that contained our HTML. Right. So also we want to handle the shortcuts map. So this shortcut situation, we don't use the global variable anymore. We want to load it from the shortcuts JSON file. So the same to-do that I have here, I want to have there, and I also want to have it when we start using the shortcuts variable, which is right here. So now we don't do it that way. We just, I suppose we require shortcuts JSON. There are different ways of doing this. I could read a file and then parse the JSON. I don't know which way I prefer, but for now I think this will work. And then this is going to be an object, is it not? What does shortcuts look like? It is an object, mapping accelerators to lists. Lists of configuration, to be more precise. So this is going to be an object. So I suppose some of the things we had on this line we want to keep. Yeah. So this is going to be an object. This is going to create an iterator from that, and then a list from the iterator, and then we map over the list. There you go. There you go, my friends. So this should work again, and it doesn't. Require entries is not a function, or its return value is not iterable. So yeah, I don't have keyboard shortcuts on the app, but everything else works, which is a win. That's already a happy ending. But require.entries is not a function. So what is going on? I will console log the result of this require. It is the object. All right. So I will do dot entries to that. And now I don't know where it complained. So maybe I should comment all this out. Okay, it's still complaining, so do I need parentheses around this? This is silly. No. So you know what? Maybe I should be doing the other way. I should be await on fs read file of that file in UTF-8, and then JSON parse what comes back. FS is not defined, okay. I guess this line should have been here after all. That is weird. Oh, I know what it is. I know what this is. So now that I have actually written out the require version and the JSON parse version, this is more verbose, but I think I prefer it. So now I can come back to this because I know what the mistake is and I'm going to fix it. So this produces an object, and what I need is to say object entries of that, because this is no longer a map, it's an object. That's why the API changed. See, no problems, and keyboard shortcuts are working. Felipe is saying, how about just saving the output of require into a variable? Maybe that will help. Yeah. Hey Felipe, it's great to have you here, but the problem was not that. The problem was, and there is a delay from what you see to what I'm doing. So when you wrote the message, I have already figured out the problem. Problem was I should have been using object entries instead, because this used to be a map, now it is an object. So there you have it. Now let's see what we changed. We actually removed all that stuff. Isn't that something? All right. Let's see. So now the code that we actually run on production. So this is the development part where we generate we run our static website generator to generate our HTML and our shortcuts JSON file. Oh, I actually want to have a comment. So I'm loading the file for the drawing, I'm loading the file, which is the HTML for the menu, but I also want to keep that to check if this works when packaged. I want to have that for this line. I seem to always miss the T in shortcuts, the first T in shortcuts. Okay. Let's see. I'm happy with this. The app is now faster to load in production, and it is not using the hack. And oh yeah. So for this last few minutes before I have to wrap it up, let's do the thing that motivated all this, which is to come here to our package JSON and reevaluate which dependencies are for development. So I know that Liafac CSS and HTML are only used for development. They don't need to be in the packaged version, and they must not be there. So Express needs to be there because we will do something crazy with OBS later. OBS WebSocket with JS, same thing. And I think that tagged template literal no op, that tagged template no op is also only used in development. So let's see. Tagged template no op is for the JavaScript tagged template literal, which I only used in the HTML, of course. So yes, that can be a development dependency as well. And I will install all of them again, but this time check it out for development. Yeah, so we'll see them coming out of dependencies and getting into development dependencies. Also, I think I updated Liafac CSS and Liafac JavaScript, so I think that the version numbers will be different. Alrighty. Yeah, see, 2.8 to 11. Seems like HTML was the same. And tagged template literal, of course, hasn't been updated in a while, because why would it? It's so simple. Okay, so now that we did this, we need to come here and change some things as well. So we use path and express, but these things only are used in development, so they must go here. And this is not only a performance thing. You don't want to load libraries when they're not up to the point where they're needed. No, these are dependencies that are only available in development, so they should not be there. They will throw an error when the packaged version is run. So let me commit this change. Oh, no. Let's double check. Oh, it actually ran. Oh, damn it. Just run it again, whatever. But what I want to do is to test the app. There you go. Keyboard shortcuts are all working, and I am happy. It seems like this changed. Oh, all right. Yeah, so this changed because, as I said, I updated Liafac CSS, which has a new design system, which has this few small changes. So small changes to the design system. I'll let this be a to-do for later. Because we are wrapping up for today. I'm pushing all the changes, and so the schedule is tomorrow we are gonna talk about coding for Reaper and JS effects over at IDQD Sound, Aria's channel. On Wednesday, we will be talking about a bass guitar and other music-related things over here on my channel. And then on Thursday, I am planning on getting back to Notestrator, and I will do a backlog grooming to find out the things that we want to work on more specifically on Thursday. Before I start the stream, I'm going to go over the backlog and I'll figure out what we want to do. But as a vague plan, we can quickly look at this. Maybe another styling pass on the menu, that is needed. Yeah, I'll not start the backlog grooming right now. I'll do it before Thursday, so I don't know exactly what I'm doing on Thursday on the app, but I'm working on Illustrator on Thursday. So thank you all for being here, participating on the chat, and supporting me by subscribing to the channel, going to Patreon and PayPal and GitHub sponsors and whatnot. And I see you tomorrow. Have a good one. Take care. Bye.